I want to talk for a little bit about teaching. In 1974 or so, I really wanted to teach very much. I was living in the ashram in Bloomington. Rudy had passed away, and I was very hungry to be a teacher. And I really didn't know at all how to teach. But I felt deep inside me that it was my purpose, if you will, and destiny to be a teacher. So I decided the reason I wasn't a teacher is I hadn't developed enough. Something wasn't yet in place inside me. So I was walking down the street with Michael Shoemaker at the time, became Swami Chittavaranda. And I said to him, I said, Michael, I really want to teach. And I was expecting at that moment to hear all the reasons I couldn't. You're not this, you're not that, da-da-da-da-da-da. And he said, great, start tonight. And that's how it all started. I said, well, are you going to tell me what to do? Are you going to show me how to teach? He said, no, you just sit there, you'll figure it out. And that was how it happened. And I sat down that night in front of a room full of students. In those days we had a lot of students. And it happened. Teaching happened. Essentially, I sat down and Bruce just got very quiet. And this presence, this energy, this openness, this availability began to express itself. And as I looked at every person in the room, I felt connected. I felt a part of them. And I felt I loved them. And I could somehow see where they were afraid, hesitant, closed, uncertain, doubtful, all of these issues. And if I just sat with one of them, one of the issues, if I just went into them and just sat there with them and kind of, if you will, kind of held their hand psychically, that it would start to become available to them in a way. They would see it, feel it, and then it would start to dissolve. And I didn't really have to do anything. I just had to be present with them. And this took place. And the feeling of connecting with each person was so remarkable because we so rarely ever do that. We so rarely ever truly connect with another person. Sometimes with a very good friend, something evolves over time where you feel connected, mostly to story. Somehow your two stories merge or mesh in a certain way and you feel familiar to each other and you feel comfortable with one another and you can open up and be available and free to discuss your life, or as much of it as you can that's not hidden. And sometimes, truly with someone you fall in love with, all the barriers fall away and you just are present. You can actually look in their eyes and do nothing but that for 20 minutes, you know. That kind of look, you know, that wonderful thing that happens, and that's connection. But where else does that happen in your life? I always tell people, try doing that to people on the subway in New York. You know, 2 seconds and you're in trouble. You know, you don't look at people, you don't connect with people that way because people are defended, they're guarded, they are locked up in their own private space. They don't want to be, if you will, invaded. But in a class situation where people are giving you permission to be with them, you open your eyes and you get out of the way. So there's no judgmental ego mind in place. There's just this quiet connectivity. And you look at people and they let go, they open, and this thing happens that is, in a sense, the most beautiful thing that happens on the planet. Two people become, for a moment, one. They really feel a shared connectivity, a shared sense of wholeness. And the corresponding feeling inside is one of, at last, oh, I can just be. You can say me if you want, but you can just be. And I know, Rudy, when he first taught me the exercise of looking into somebody's eyes and looking into his eyes, he was so casual about it. He had a very small store on 7th Avenue, I mean really tiny, about half the size of this room, and filled with Buddhas to the ceiling and Shivas and Ganeshas and everything else. And it was an incredibly powerful store, but he didn't have room to really teach very well in there except at his desk. So he said, come on. And we took 2 chairs and we put them outside right on the subway grating. And we're just sitting there on 7th Avenue and people are walking by right next to the Village Vanguard. And he sits down and he tells me, okay, take a breath in your heart, hold it, ask for help to surrender. Then exhale, hold it for 10 seconds. Then let out a little bit of air, bring it into your navel chakra, into your belly. Hold it for 10 seconds, ask for help to surrender. Feel whatever you feel, feel the energy go up your spine to the top of your head, let it circulate, breathe normally, and try it again in 3 minutes. That was it. That was my introduction to this work. Meanwhile, he's going like this. And he was very insistent that I keep my eyes open on him for the entire class. Meanwhile, people are walking back and forth. This is the crowded street in New York City, and yet I felt there was nobody in the world but Rudy. I just sat there and we looked at each other, the exercise happened, and then he made me try it on the spot. And I'm like, can I do this? What's going on? I'm telling you, it all fell away. It just fell away. I was just present with another person who was knowing me, looking at me, and really accepting me and really loving me. It was the most extraordinary thing. And I began, from that moment on, to be a student of Rudy. And I kept wondering, when I did this work, if I would ever be good enough, ever rise to the occasion where I could do what he was doing, if I could actually become a teacher. And how would I become a teacher? What would be the process of doing that? And I was always afraid to ask. I mean, I really didn't think I had ever arrived at a place where I was good enough. And I watched Rudy work with me over the course of the 7 years that I knew him. And I could feel all of these qualities in me that were resistant. Some people would call them negative, fearful, doubting. All that stuff would start to fall away. It would just keep melting away. I felt more and more expansive. But I kept imagining that I had to get to some place here before I was ready to share this with anybody. And it was a really long drama for me. I brought a guy to class, a wonderful guy named Michael Austin, who I worked with in a film department somewhere. I forget who we were working for, but he was a really great guy. And I said, you should come to Rudy's class. You'd really like this. It's really wonderful. And he went to Rudy's class, and Rudy just saw this amazing guy. And one day, Rudy was teaching, and he said, Michael, you take over. And he got up and walked out of the room, and Michael sat down in the teacher's spot, and he taught. It was the first person that Rudy made a teacher. And I kept thinking, but I brought this guy. I should be first. Why is Michael teaching? It's my turn. And that was really horrible. And Michael continued to teach and was quite remarkable, and I didn't know how that happened. And now I was really confused. It was really painful, and I really desperately wanted to do this. So when I finally did become a teacher, you know, I just watched the experience of doing it. And I learned a fair number of things over the, well, it's going to be 40 years or so next year that I've been doing this. And you learn some, I hope, very simple things. One is that when you sit down to teach, if your mind is running 1,000,000 miles a minute and worrying about how am I appearing, what are they thinking, am I doing the right thing, you're not doing the right thing. If you really find yourself in that condition and you cannot get past it, don't teach. Being completely self-referential, ego-minded in that space is not beneficial to you and not beneficial to your students. You really have to get to a point where you can sit there and let go of you. And I will put it this way, there will be certain classes where you will be present and your ego mind will be there. And it's an extraordinary experience because it's so painful, because all these people are looking at you and they are waiting for energy and flow and availability and connectivity, and you're offering none of it. If you want to know what suffering is, that's suffering. Sitting there and realizing how small, insignificant, incapable, and unworthy you truly are. And it's horrible. I remember we were in a class once in Big Indian, and Calvin Holt was teaching. And I love Calvin, and he was one of the early teachers. And he's sitting there, and Rudy's taking the class in the back of the room. And I think Calvin's doing a great job. I'm, you know, wow, I'm working, and he's looking. And all of a sudden Rudy yells, "Get out of your head! Calvin, now, get out of your head. You are in your head. You are destroying this class. You are a problem for everybody in this room." And Calvin is sitting there teaching. He said, "Do it now. Do it right now. Come on, do it." And I'm going, you know, like this is the most horrifying thing that could ever happen to any human being. And Calvin can't get up and walk away. He has to do it. He has to do it. And he does it. And Rudy said, "Good, keep going." And he finished the class. I couldn't see any difference, honestly, but I knew, and I now can see when people are in their head very clearly. And, you know, I do my best to help draw them out of their head, which is something that a teacher can actually do. You can actually lower the energy. You can bring the energy down from head into throat, into heart, into navel, into sex, and into the base of the spine. You can help it go down, and especially if you can get to the heart chakra, you can really open the heart in somebody by loving them really deeply, and the energy just goes whoop. It just drops right out of the head. It just goes right into the heart. And it's really simple, it's really beautiful, and then it slowly begins to make its way down, and it flows. When you're sitting and you're teaching, it's not like you're there because you know what to do. You're there because you have worked hard enough to earn that spot. You have done something in your practice or in your life that has allowed you to be put here, and all you have to do there is be empty. Be empty. It's not to be full of you. It's not even to be full of God. It's to be empty. And then whatever passes through you passes. It's like being, as Rudy would call it, a hose. You're a hose. The stuff that's passing through you isn't yours. It's feeling full of that. I mean, you'll feel the fullness, trust me. As that energy moves through you, you will feel it. But it's not your energy. It's just energy. And it moves through, not for you, but for everyone else. It's for them, for you guys, not for the teacher. The more you are nobody, the more remarkable this becomes. The more you get out of the way, the more flow there will be. And you will feel it. And your whole job is to let it instruct you and help you to know what to do and how to help the people around you. The minute you own this energy, the minute you go, wow, I am a conductor of energy, and you start to make yourself this big person, this big ego-minded guru teacher, one, the flow will dry up. Two, you will create a situation for yourself that is very dangerous. Because spiritual ego, which is what this will create, is the most dangerous force on the planet. People who think it's theirs become driven by mind, by gut, and they miss the depth of connection that really allows them to serve. They're no longer serving the other, they are serving their own need, their own mind, their own ego presence. And so when this happens to a teacher, and it happens fairly often, if they can't learn from that and really fight to get back to their own depth, their own surrender, if they can't get to that spot, they wreak havoc with their students. It would be great if people who do that were able to realize it and stop teaching. But that's rarely how it works. Usually the teaching becomes more and more what I call shamanic. It's more manipulative and controlling. And it's Rudy has described actually in a lot of his writing the experience of the magician. Teachers who become magicians. And if you want to know what that's like, you should read it, because it really is valuable to understand the manipulating of people rather than the freeing of people. Real teachers free you. They free you. Other teachers make you their student. They need you. As long as a teacher needs you, it's their problem. A teacher has to be willing to let you go. One of the first things I try to tell people when they study with me is, try this. If it doesn't work for you, go to the place that works. Find the teacher that works for you. I'm in no way trying to make somebody a student of this practice or of what I do. This is just one practice. There are multiples of practices out there, and there are so many teachers. Everybody should find the person who works for them. There's no reason this would be the practice for everybody. It doesn't work that way. People should look for the teacher that resonates. And if this resonates, then they should work and they should commit to the practice as deeply as they can. One of the most important things about teaching is teaching what you know. Don't teach what you've read. Don't teach what you've been told. Don't teach philosophy. Teach what you know. And what you know is your experience. You know what you know. And if you go really deeply into that truth, the thing you will realize is you don't know anything. You don't know anything. And the most honest teaching is that. You don't know yet. When you teach, often knowledge arises. It's not your knowledge. It's not what your head tells you. Something arises and it speaks. And you will know, because if you tried to give answers, they wouldn't resonate. They wouldn't have content. But if you really surrender, the thing that rises up in you speaks its truth. and it has very little, if anything, to do with you. But when it does have to do with you, don't talk about what you haven't experienced. Talk about what you know, because you've sat and this has happened. This is what goes through you. Talk about what happens when you sit. Talk about what happens when you go through your day. Personalize it. That's meaningful to people. People want to know, among other things, that you're human. As long as you're in a body and you're in this world, you're human. You can try to be superhuman, you can try to be supernatural, you can try to be whatever you think is going to be a good show, but I'm telling you, you're just a magician. A human being is a human being who's trying to figure this out and work it through. And you're going to learn a lot, and things are going to happen that are amazing. You're going to really find huge segments of your being falling away, of your personality, of your ego mind. The world is going to begin to disassemble you on some massive level, and what will be left is this pure, essential you, this being. But to the world and everyone around you, it's going to look just like you always looked. I remember Rudy at the end of his life, I kept saying to Blanche, I said, you know, Rudy has really become Rudy. That's what he's become. He's become completely Rudy. He hasn't become Shiva or Buddha. He became Rudy. And I could feel it. I could feel he was so completely himself in a way that I had never seen in another human being. People so often became a presentation, if you will. They became something that they wanted the world to admire. They wanted the world to like. And that's another big important part of teaching. Don't do it to become a new identity. Don't be a teacher who now is a teacher. Because the minute you do that, you have just replaced the identity of not being a teacher with being a teacher. Or the identity of being, you know, whatever you are, a dentist with it, now I'm a teacher. It's just, they're just identities. What you are is what you are, which is the totality of being. You are all there is. That's what you are. You are this vast truth. So to walk around as a teacher is a limitation on the truth of who you are. It's a real limitation. You are this. You are this. And every one of you is this. Every one of you is this. And let me say, if the world ever needed teachers, it needs them right now. As you are all aware, anyone who is alive at the moment, who looks at a newspaper, who looks at whatever you want to call it, changing weather patterns, at the world that you're in, this world is imbalanced on some level. I'm not saying it's not exactly as it should be, but it needs something to ground it. It needs something to work as a corrective, if you will. And to be a teacher doesn't mean sitting on a hassock like this with your legs crossed and your eyes open and looking at people. That is a very particular kind of energy experience that we do in this class. What the world needs is people who are present and available and connected to other human beings, who reach out and see people, who love people, who are one with the people around them. You don't even have to let those people know you're that. You can be an amazing teacher and never once tell anybody you're a teacher. It's just how you act in the world. And what that does is it begins to create energies or forces, if you will, of balance, harmony, love, equilibrium, all around you. That's what we are capable of doing. And so each one of you in this room can, and in some ways has a right to be, a teacher. But you don't have to do it this way. It's okay if you want to talk to me about that. Some of you can and should do this. But many of you, this is not the way it's going to work for you. The way you will teach is how you will live. You will live as an example of a conscious human being. You will let your daily life express itself in such a way that it becomes meaningful to you and to those around you. That it's not sloppy, misdirected, and basically a failed experience. It is a life full of lessons, full of awareness, full of knowledge, full of evolving consciousness. And every one of you can be that. Every one of you can express it to people around you, and you will serve the world. You will be teachers. You are teachers. But if you don't own that, then you're not. It's completely up to you. You can be the teacher that the universe wants you to be, or not. You can also be a remarkable student. There's nothing wrong with being a student. A student tries to learn and take in and open to knowledge and open to experience, open to love, open to this idea of being nothing. And then just watch what happens. You don't have to tell anybody about it. You just be a great student. I used to watch Rudy when Muktananda was here, and he was like the best student I ever saw. He just was there absorbing. He was there being himself. And in his studenthood, or studentship, whatever you call it, I learned more from Rudy than often when he just was trying to teach me something. I just watched how he was the living example of someone who wanted this, who was open to this, who had made himself ready to be one with the most simple of all things, which is the truth of being. I never knew anybody hungrier than Rudy, ever. And I watched how he broke down all of this stuff. And when you knew Rudy early in the game, this was a complicated, troubled guy on a lot of levels. He had a lot of issues. He was not an easy personality. He did not come from an easy family, a broken family with lots of problems. He just worked his way through all of that stuff. He had to, because if he didn't work his way through, he would have been crushed by the weight of his family, of his life, of his daily experience. But he refused to do that. And he learned how to be a teacher by living life. He just lived it to the hilt, and he really became this person who transformed every situation into an opportunity to be freer, to be bigger, to be stronger, to be more present as a human being. And he got there. At the end of his life, I'm telling you, he was full of this presence, and his teaching was 24/7. He never stopped being that teacher. Never. He was, if you walk down the street with him, I used to walk down the street, we'd go from the house to his store, and he would start saying, "Oh my God, look at the color of that piece of glass in the street. That is so beautiful. I had no idea. I would never have seen that, a week ago. Now I see it, and it's like, oh my God, it's beautiful." I'm going, wow, I never saw a broken piece of glass in the street that's got my attention, let alone that reflected a kind of beauty. But he was always doing that. He was just consummate teacher. So, of course, I'm talking about all this because I am leaving, here. I think we have 4 classes left. And so, in a certain sense, you guys will be teacherless, at least Bruceless, But there are teachers in this room who will be continuing to teach this work. And you will be given information about everybody, where the classes are, where you can go to sit if you want to continue sitting. So you're not going to be left with nothing. I hope on occasion to make trips back to this part of the country, and maybe we'll get to be able to sit together. But the important thing that I want to leave you with is, even when there's no teacher, there's the ultimate teacher. And Rudy was absolutely specific about this. Life is the teacher. Period. Your life is the teacher. But if you're not a student, you won't learn the lessons. You have to be the student. Let life do what it's going to do. Trust me, it is going to inform you about everything we're talking about here. But if you have the groundwork in place to learn from this adventure of experience of being, you'll get everything you need. And then if you want to share what you've learned with people, make yourself a teacher. Rudy told me that when a teacher dies, all of his students have the right to take up the mantle. They can all become a teacher, they can make themselves a teacher, which I think is part of the Hindu tradition. I don't know what happens when a teacher leaves. I don't know whether you have exactly the same right or not, but in a sense, I'm giving it to you. And I don't even know if I have the permission to give it to you, but I am giving it for a lot of reasons. One of them is the world needs you. It needs teachers. 2, I've seen so many bad teachers in my life that I don't think any of you would be as bad as the ones I've seen who were made teachers. I think every one of you has the capacity to be truly a wonderful presence in people's lives. And if you want help or guidance, you can always turn to me or the other teachers, or you can turn to yourself, which will guide you much better than any of us, because all the person sitting here is a representation of yourself. It makes it easier for you to hear through the voice of this person sitting here. You hear yourself speak to you. But I guarantee you, when you sit quietly with yourself, it will sound just like, if not my voice, the feelings of what you're hearing here or from any teacher will come right through you. That's the amazing thing about all of this, is that the teacher is within, the teacher arises and expresses itself through you. It's an amazing thing. And if you let go of you, it will be there. If you surrender, if you ask for help to surrender, if you just open, what else is there? What else is there but yourself? And yourself is present. Is it ever not present? No, never. Not ever. Self is infinite and eternal presence. And as you let go of you, it has room to flourish. If you take ownership of it, it doesn't have much room. But if you let go, wow, it's just there for everybody. So I'm hoping that you all understand that sitting in this spot is no more meaningful than standing in line at the supermarket and being kind to the checker, being kind to the person behind you and in front of you. You don't even have to talk to them, just be kind, just feel connected. Feel connected to the world around you. It's no more meaningful to be here than it is to be there. It's all one thing, all the time. It's completely up to you. How do you want to do it? If you get lost along the way and you don't know what to do, it's because you've lost your connection to yourself, or you've gotten distracted in a big way. 2 things. Sit down and meditate. Take a deep breath. ask for help to surrender, which means to get back to yourself, or call your teacher or email. You know, I mean, those are your choices. Get back to yourself, get back to yourself, get back to yourself. Be yourself. When you're yourself, you are the biggest gift this world could ever have. Those of you who are starting to teach, just stay humble. Stay humble. It's not you. It's yourself that's working. Any questions?
Is it important to talk about whatever comes up after one teaches?
I don't know if it's important, but if it wants to express itself, don't get in the way of it. You know, if you don't feel something that wants to be said, you can at least ask for questions and let people express their need or concern and then respond to it. And I find a lot of people who start teaching feel good about the silent part because they're kind of not on the carpet on some level. They are, but it doesn't look like it. And most people honestly can't tell if you're completely present or if you're distracted in some way. Rudy once said that one of his most amazing classes, you may have heard him say this, he heard a Broadway musical playing in his head the entire time. And yet he kept teaching the whole time. There was enormous distraction, but the teaching came through. I have found, even when I have had distractions of my own, that the teaching's still working. It's doing it all by itself. When you have to talk, it'll be a little different. Because at that point, it's trying to formulate itself. And you'll really see if the throat chakra, which is the space of communication, when it's really open, it becomes quite eloquent. You know, it says things perfectly. When it's kind of shut down, it's, you know, it's a little bit off. And you'll see it. But if you start to get judgmental of your own presentation, this will get worse and worse. So you have to let it just flow. Just let it flow. And it'll be what it wants to be. And don't be afraid of it. And again, speak your truth. So say to somebody, look, this is scary for me, or this is hard. I don't know the answer to that. And be sure, one of the greatest things teachers can say is, I don't know the answer to that. It's really important. But here's my thinking about it, or here's what I think about it, rather than what I know about it. And then it comes across as being informative and valuable, but without being, quote unquote, the truth. You know, when you don't own the answer, but you just allow it to arise in the best way it can, and let it move into the space of the person who's asking, that's all you can do. It's the best you can do, and it's wonderful. You know, I mean, if we're honest with people, we'll help them. If we speak our truth, we'll help them. Never think of it as the truth, because who knows the truth? Nobody I know. But if it's a truth or your truth, it speaks to people. George.
So I say again that, you know, Bruce Denny gives classes once a week in New York City, and it's a good place to go and sit.
Yeah, well,
he would be here on Sundays, but he works on Sundays. So.
No, there are now sheets out downstairs of the various classes that are going on, and you can all take those with you. And I'm going to give everybody the emails of everyone in class so they can write you and let you know where the classes will be. And then at least you'll have a clear idea of where you can go to continue sitting. And, you know, it's available. You'll have to make a little effort, but you've all had to make efforts to come here, so everything will be its own effort, but it's worth it. It's worth it. The greatest thing about class, and you all know this, is the group experience. Sitting together in a group, this is called Sangha, sharing the truth together, is somehow a richer experience than sharing it with nobody. It's really a beautiful thing. So you can come together and you can have this as a communal moment. Anybody else? Okay, one last thing. We had a yard sale here the last 2 days, trying to get rid of the excess stuff. And we got rid of some, but there's a ton of stuff left over. And we moved it all into our garage. And it's sitting there waiting for Salvation Army to come on Wednesday. Any one of you who would like to go in the garage and take anything you like, forget the price tags, just take it. You're welcome to take it home. We have good stuff there.
Will you do better?
Would I do better than, yeah, I'll try, George. I'll help you carry it to the car. But we do have a lot of stuff. We have televisions and old computers for whatever that's worth. I still have a lot of books, and we've added to the books. So those of you who've already looked at the books, there's more. So if you have anything that there that you would like, take it. Okay, and thank you for coming. And there will be class next week.
Not the toboggan or sled.
Oh, yeah, don't take the toboggan or sled. Or, is there a car? No, there's no car in the garage. Okay.
Is class next week?
Class next week.
Labor Day weekend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, class next week and the week after. I'm forgetting all the dates, unfortunately. We're leaving here on the 18th of September for 2 weeks to go to LA and Seattle. Then we'll be back and there will be either 1 or 2 more classes. If there are 2 more classes, the last one will be with no furniture and paper plates and paper everything, because we won't have any silverware.
Bring your own cushion.
Yeah, bring your own cushion, and we'll just sit in this empty space. But it'll be, if we can do that, we'll do it. If not, the classes will end on the first weekend of October. If we can do it, we'll do it through the second weekend of October. Again, thank you very much.